We're still in domain 4, and this time we're going to discuss tasks 6 and 7. Demonstrate an understanding of HIPAA privacy and security regulations. And 7, develop and deliver education for providers and ancillary staff. All right, so the first thing that we need to discuss is the subject that is key. When it comes to HIPAA, what the focus is, PHI. That's primarily what it's about. Protected health information or personal health information. And we learned in Introduction to Medical Coding that personal health information is anything that links the patient to his health status. That's anything. And if you didn't know, your medical record is a legal document. And I also, and you all know this from part 1 or introduction to medical insurance. Whew. Introduction to insurance, you know that PHI is stored in the medical record often. All right. And it is a legal document. And that's why it's so important to authenticate a record. So doctors have to properly authenticate those records because they are legal documents indeed. Now, there are some ways that patients' personal health information is protected, and it begins at the onset of an encounter. And one of the first things a patient receives when they begin care at a practice is the Notice of Privacy Practices, that NPP form. They receive that, or they have to sign that they've received it. But have you ever taken a look at that NPP form? Well, I did. And that form says the following. Number 1, it says that practice is going to make every attempt to protect your protected health information. And they show you how the PHI may be used and disclosed in that practice. They also review their duties to protect your PHI. Also, if at any time your PHI is disclosed without permission, then it's your right to complain to the Department of Health and Human Services. And that's what number 3 is. It says that you can file a complaint. Also, in that NPP, they should have a point of contact for further information and complaints. And finally, they list specific distribution requirements for providers and plans. And providers and plans, they are covered entities. So we're going to talk about those covered entities in a little, but let's go ahead and let's discuss the privacy officer in a practice. HIPAA mandates that each practice appoints a privacy officer. And some of the duties of a privacy officer, number 1, conducting, I'm going to go back. We got a little, come on. Conducting, I'm going to use my little laser pointer. Conducting employee training investigating privacy incidents, documentation and records maintenance, complaint handling, reporting breaches as they occur, collecting business associate agreements, privacy risk assessment and management, developing policies and procedures, managing privacy training programs, incident investigation, implementing security measures, training and education, coordinating the training, security awareness workforce training, ensuring compliance with privacy standards, compliance monitoring, appointing a HIPAA compliance officer. That's, yeah, they do that. Also, preventing unauthorized access to PHI, adopting appropriate policies, and implementing HIPAA compliant policies and procedures. So HIPAA mandates that every practice appoint a privacy officer. And they also mandate that whenever disclosing a patient's information, you must apply the minimum necessary rule, right? And what is minimum necessary? Minimum necessary means you need to give the minimum necessary PHI at all times. So if a payer says, hey, I need an operative report for this procedure on 2/2/22, then that's what you send. Send the operative report. Don't send the entire file. There you go. All right, so minimum necessary. Now, this was during the times of the paper file. Now that we have these electronic health records, minimum necessary applies a little differently. So that means that providers should access the minimum amount of the record. You don't access the entire record. You access the area that what you need, and that's it. All right, so minimum necessary applies. And this applies to disclosures or requests by healthcare providers for treatment purposes. This applies to disclosures to the individual who is the subject of the information, so the patient. This applies to uses or disclosures made pursuant to an individual's authorization, uses or disclosures required for compliance with HIPAA administrative simplification rules, disclosures to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services when disclosure of information is required under the privacy rule for enforcement purposes, uses or disclosures required by other law. All right. So minimum necessary applies to everyone. And as you can see, even enforcers of the law. So they take the patient's protected health information seriously, very, very much. Now, who does the HIPAA privacy rule also pertain to? But we call them covered entities, right? So HIPAA says that if you are a TAP responsible for the treatment, the administration of business, and the provider, you are a covered entity and you are bound by HIPAA to uphold the standards and to protect the patient's health information. So, a covered entity is a healthcare provider. These are doctors, clinics, psychologists, dentists, chiropractors, nursing homes, pharmacy, etc. Any provider and their staff, and they're responsible for the treatment. And then you have healthcare clearinghouse. And these are the people that administer the business, administration of business. And then you have your health plan. There's your P. And these are health insurance companies, your HMOs, PPOs, government programs too. Yeah, federal programs. They too are covered entities, and they are under the payments or the plans. So these are the TAPs, and the TAPs are covered entities, and they are bound by the law. And if you didn't know, a patient is not a covered entity. In fact, know what a covered entity is, because you may be asked if a covered entity, if a particular entity is a covered entity. I've seen that a lot on this exam. So a covered entity is a TAP responsible for treatment, administration of business or healthcare clearinghouse, or health plan, the payments, and their staff. All right, I'm going to let that marinate. And while you're marinating, what is the consequence if a covered entity fails to uphold a patient's protected health information? What is the consequence? Well, there are consequences. Well, again, the patient has the right to file a claim through the Office of Civil Rights. And the Office of Civil Rights will investigate the claim and take action against that provider. All right. So Office of Civil Rights, or OCR, they pretty much focus on patient privacy enforcement. That's what they do. Now, some people confuse it with the Office of Inspector General, and their focus is fraud and abuse. And additionally, there are some laws that both of these entities or agencies investigate. Any of those, their violations. So let's take a look at these laws. Here are some privacy and fraud and abuse oversight laws. So these are the laws designed to protect the patient's privacy as well as prevent fraud and or abuse. All right, so we know HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability Act of 1996, this is a primary law in the US that governs and protects the patient's health information. There you go. Also, number 2, we have the False Claims Act, and it imposes liability on individuals and companies who defraud governmental programs. And this includes submitting fraudulent claims or making false records or statements to get a claim paid. That will be a violation of the False Claims Act. Number 3, we have an anti-kickback statute, or AKS, and this prohibits the exchange or offer to exchange of anything of value to induce or reward the referral of a federal health care program business. So no kickbacks in healthcare. Number 4, physician self-referral law. Now, this is the Stark Law, and this prohibits a physician from referring patients to receive designated health services payable by Medicare and Medicaid from entities in which the physician or an immediate family member has a financial relationship, unless an exception applies. All right. So would you say that's nepotism? Anti-nepotism law? Number 5, Healthcare fraud statute. It makes a criminal offense to knowingly execute or attempt to execute a scheme to defraud any healthcare benefit program. And finally, we have high tech. That's Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act. It strengthens the enforcement of HIPAA rules by increasing the penalties for health organizations that violate HIPAA privacy and security rules. So make yourself familiar with these 6 entities. These are not the only, but these are some of the most common privacy and fraud and abuse oversight laws. And the enforcers are Office of Civil Rights for patient privacy issues and OIG, Office of Inspector General for fraud and abuse. Okay, coders, now it's time. What is it time to do? Let me make sure everything is copacetic. There you go. All right. Here's the first question. Coding policies and procedures in any HIM coding compliance manual should include all of the following components except, now this is something that you're going to have to kind of take an educated guess, and that's why I put it here. All right, is it A, B, C, or D? And if you said B, outstanding, outstanding, because if A, AHIMA Code of Ethics, definitely you should have the Code of Ethics in your policies and procedures in an HIM, Health Information Management Coding Compliance Manual, absolutely. Also, AHIMA Standards of Ethical Coding, absolutely. And D, bylaws and regulations of the medical staff. These all deal with ethics, and these all should be components of any HIM coding compliance manual, not the official coding guidelines, because that's not pertinent. So I'm sure you got it right. So let's go with the next one. The specific legislation that provides for criminal penalties for healthcare professionals who knowingly and willfully attempt to defraud any of the healthcare benefit programs, and further stipulates that physicians or other providers are accountable for information they know or should know, is the A, Federal False Claims Act, B, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, C, Operation Restore Trust, and D, the Balanced Budget Act of 1997. What say you? Okay, so if you said the Federal False Claims Act, outstanding. If we reference the list that we just reviewed, you'll see that it is the False Claims Act because it imposes liability on individuals who defraud governmental programs. And this includes fraudulent claims or making false records or statements to get a claim paid. How do you know it's fraud, Mrs. J? Because the key words in this question knowingly and willfully attempt to defraud any of the healthcare benefit programs, and further stipulates that physicians or other providers are accountable for information they know or should know. Now that's key, coders. You could be held liable for something that you should know. Let's say you don't know it, but if you should know it, you could be held responsible. So it's always best to take the highest road. Always, always operate with ethics and never accept anything that is criminal or unethical. Never engage it. All right. All right, we've got another question. Under HIPAA's privacy and security rules, which of the following is not considered a covered entity? All right. A, healthcare providers. B, healthcare clearinghouse. C, life insurance company. Or D, health plan. What say you? Okay. If you say life insurance company, outstanding. If you review the covered entities, they are TAPs, responsible for the treatment, administration of business, such as the healthcare clearinghouse, and payments, such as health plans. All right. So providers are a part of the treatment. Your clearinghouse is your administration of business, and your health plan, they're responsible for payments. But life insurance companies are not applicable. We are only talking about medical insurance. All right. Final question. Records maintained by a covered entity that are used to make decisions about an individual's best describes, I want to say that again. Records maintained by covered entities, by a covered entity that are used to make decisions about an individual best describes A, business records, B, legal health records, or C, limited data set, or D, designated record. Okay, coders. This will tell me if you really understood the statement that I made at the onset of this discussion. All right. So if you said a legal health record outstanding, always remember that the patient record is a legal health record that must be properly authenticated or signed because it could hold up in court when you have to make decisions about an individual. All right. So if you got those correct, outstanding. But if you learn something, that is priceless.
Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, happy coding.